Rise, my apprentice.
Masters, I appreciate you coming at such a late hour. Given the strain of the war, I believe it is time we embrace every advantage at our disposal. Allow me to introduce Commander Mithra Nuruodo, though he has chosen the name Thrawn for ease of conversation.
It is an honor to meet you both.
The Republic does not often employ outsiders in military matters.
Nor do the Jedi often welcome them into their discussions. That you are both here speaks volumes about the urgency of the times.
From the unknown regions? You come. Why here? Now?
War does not respect borders. My people have long studied conflicts beyond our own. When the Republic's struggle became apparent, I sought to understand it.
And what do you understand about this war?
That the Republic is facing an enemy that fights without honor, but with precision. That the Jedi, for all their wisdom, are being forced into roles not of their choosing. That victory, true victory, will not come from numbers alone, but from understanding the enemy before they can act.
You believe aid you can provide?
If permitted, yes. Not as a leader, but as a student of war. A war you did not seek, yet must now end.
And what do you expect in return?
Only the opportunity to serve.
I trust you will see that he is most valuable. And rest assured, Masters, his counsel is at your discretion.
The war had consumed the Republic. World after world fell into chaos, the Separatist armies pushing deeper into the Republic space. The Jedi stretched thin, led from the front lines, but victory was never guaranteed. The clone commanders fought with loyalty and precision, but against the relentless droid legions, numbers alone would not decide the outcome. The Republic needed something more. It needed a mind unlike any other. It needed Thrawn. Mithra Nuruodo, a name spoken with both admiration and unease. To the Republic, he was simply Thrawn, a commander whose mind turned battlefields into grand puzzles, each move a precise calculation toward inevitable victory. He was not a Jedi, nor clone, nor politician. He was something beyond them all, and the galaxy took notice. Thrawn's brilliance was undeniable. The Chancellor respected him. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine saw Thrawn as a necessary piece in the war's grand design. His victories reshaped the war, his strategies bringing order to the chaos. The Republic hailed him as its greatest commander, but Palpatine saw something greater: potential. Thrawn was not ruled by emotions. He did not fight for glory or power. He fought for structure, for control, for stability. Palpatine watched him closely, already imagining how such a mind might serve beyond the war, how Thrawn's methods could shape the coming empire. But the Jedi respected him also. Unlike so many officers in the Republic's military, Thrawn did not rely on brute force. He studied, he adapted, he won wars before the first shot was even fired. Many Jedi, including Anakin Skywalker, had fought beside him and found themselves respecting his methods, even when they could not understand them. He observed the Jedi not as allies nor as threats, but as pieces, each one wielding strengths and weaknesses that could be used to control the battlefield. To him, they were warriors of instinct. He was a warrior of reason. As the war continued, the Republic was always at a disadvantage. From the beginning, the war had been designed for the Separatists to hold the upper hand. The droid armies were endless, the production far outpacing the Republic's ability to replenish its own clone force. The Republic's fleets, though powerful, were stretched thin, their resources siphoned by a war economy drowning in debt. Every battle won was merely a delay. Victory never felt final. The Republic's generals saw the struggles as unfortunate realities. Thrawn saw them as something else. He saw design. The Separatists had numbers, uncountable ways of battle droids that required no sleep, no food, no fear. The Camino cloning facilities, by comparison, could only produce so many soldiers at a time. It was a war of attrition. The Republic was never meant to win. But Thrawn did not believe in unwinnable wars. Instead of meeting the droid armies head on, he studied them, their programming, their weaknesses, their reliance on centralized command structures. He did not engage in battles of endurance, he engaged in battles of precision. Where the Jedi fought heroically and the clones fought loyally, Thrawn fought intelligently. He struck at supply chains, not battlefields. He shattered key Separatist manufacturing hubs, crippling droid production rather than fighting an endless wave of enemies. He cut off resources before a battle even began, forcing the enemy to come to him unprepared. And when a battle had to be fought, it was never on Separatist terms, it was always on his. But the war was not fought only in a void of space or on the surface of distant worlds. The Republic was bleeding itself dry, its economy teetering under the weight of unchecked spending, corporate deals, and corruption buried beneath layers of bureaucracy. At first, Thrawn accepted this as a wartime necessity. Wars demand sacrifice. Wars demand cost. But the numbers did not add up. The Republic's debt spiraled out of control, and yet resources disappeared. Military supply lines found themselves shortchanged, entire fleets forced to make do with less. Meanwhile, companies like the Banking Clan and the Techno Union, Separatist-aligned factions, continued to benefit. War was meant to be chaotic. This war was controlled. Thrawn was not a man who ignored patterns. The Republic's struggles were not random. Their shortages were not coincidental. The Separatist advantages were not natural. The war was not just being fought, it was being orchestrated. The conflict was not about who was winning or losing, it was about ensuring it never ended, but by who. Thrawn did not have the answer yet, but he would find it, and when he did, the responsible would fall. Thrawn had always believed that the war was a game of deception. Victory did not go to the strongest, nor the most righteous. It went to those who saw the pieces on the board for what they truly were, and something about this war was wrong. The war's very foundation was unnatural. Two armies had appeared from nowhere, fully formed, ready for battle before the first shot was even fired. A war of design, not of circumstance. That was what disturbed Thrawn the most, so he began to dig. The creation of the Grand Army of the Republic was, on the surface, well documented. The Kaminoans had received a commission from Jedi Master Sifo Dyas, a Jedi long dead before the war began. The clones had been bred, trained, and conditioned to serve the Republic, and when war came, they were ready. It was a convenient explanation. Too convenient. Thrawn cross-referenced the records, Kamino's financial transactions, discrepancies in the timing of the Order, the Jedi Council's own lack of involvement. The numbers did not add up. The Jedi had not created this army, but someone had. Sifo Dyas was dead, which meant the true architect of the clone army remained unknown. But Thrawn was patient. He followed the trail, peeling back each layer of deception, searching for who had truly orchestrated this war. And then, the first undeniable truth revealed itself. The Kaminoans had not just been working with the Republic, they had received off-world visitors before the war. Visitors who had arrived in secrecy outside of the official Republic records. The payment for the clones had been carefully hidden, funneled through accounts that no longer existed. But Thrawn's mind worked in patterns, and there was a pattern. A new name surfaced in the investigation, a single bounty hunter, Jango Fett, the genetic template for every clone in the Republic's army. Fett had been hired on Kamino, and yet, at the same time, he had been seen working for the Separatists. The same man responsible for the Republic's soldiers was also in service to Count Dooku, and that was the revelation that changed everything. Thrawn sat in silence, staring at the reports before him. The Sith had not chosen a side in this war. They were the war. A Sith Lord had created the clone army, shaping the Republic's forces in secret. Another Sith Lord led the Separatists. Two enemies, two sides, and yet they served the same master. The war was not about victory, it was about control. The Jedi were being deceived, the Senate was blind, and the Republic itself was marching towards something far worse than war, something by design. Thrawn's red eyes narrowed. He was now hunting an enemy that no one else even realized existed. Thrawn sat in the dim glow of the command chamber, his piercing red eyes fixed on the holographic display before him. The galaxy had always been at war in one form or another. Whether it was the Republic's struggle to maintain order, the Jedi's endless battle for peace, or the Separatist' desire to forge a new system, conflict had been inevitable. But this war was different. It was not a struggle for ideology or freedom. It was a carefully constructed illusion. A Sith Lord had played both sides, maneuvering the Republic and the Separatists like pieces on a Dejarik board. The Jedi, once revered as protectors, were blind to it. The Senate, obsessed with bureaucracy, was powerless to stop it. And now, Thrawn stood at a crossroads. The Sith plan was now clear to him. Step 1. Control the Republic through war. Step 2. Weaken the Jedi, ensuring their influence waned. Step 3. Dissolve the Senate, replacing it with something stronger, a single ruler, an empire. Thrawn was not blind to the efficiency of such a system. A galactic government ruled by one supreme leader, freed from the corruption of politicians, free from the indecisiveness of bureaucracy. A galaxy no longer ruled by emotion, but by a calculated order. That was a future he could serve. And yet, if Thrawn exposed the Sith, if he revealed that the war was nothing more than a manipulation, the galaxy would descend into madness. The Jedi would see themselves as righteous warriors fighting an ancient evil, but the Jedi were flawed. They preached peace but lived by violence. They rejected attachment but allowed their own hypocrisy to blind them. If the Jedi led this war against the Sith, it would be no war of strategy. It would be a crusade, and crusades led only to destruction. The Republic would splinter. The Separatists would not simply return to the fold, they would resist even harder. The moment the war became real, no side would hold the advantage, and chaos would consume the galaxy in ways even a Sith Lord could not predict. Thrawn had no allegiance to the Jedi, but he had no allegiance to the Sith either. There was only one solution. If the Sith Lord sought to take power, then Thrawn would let him, for now. Because no matter how brilliant this Sith believed himself to be, no matter how many wars he had orchestrated, he had never faced Thrawn. An empire would be built, the Jedi would be destroyed, and the galaxy would change forever. But Thrawn would ensure that when the time was right, he would be the one shaping its future. Not the Sith, not the Jedi. Him. Thrawn slowly exhaled, rising from his seat. His mind was set. For now, he would allow the Sith Lord's plans to unfold. He would watch. He would learn. And when the time came, he would strike. And the galaxy would belong to him. The war raged on. To most, it was a relentless struggle. An uncertain conflict where victories were overshadowed by mounting losses, where planets changed hands, and where hope seemed as fleeting as the peace they all claimed to fight for. To Thrawn, the war was a stage. Every battle, every campaign, every decision made by Republic leadership was another piece placed on the board. The Jedi led from the front, the clones fought with unwavering loyalty, and the Separatists continued to press the Republic's limits. And through it all, Thrawn played the fool. He served without question. He obeyed the orders given to him. He did not challenge the decisions of the Supreme Chancellor, nor did he push too hard in his investigations of the war's origins. To those watching, he was simply the Republic's greatest strategist, a man of precision, but still a loyal servant. It was exactly what he wanted them to believe. While the Sith Lord and his puppets continued their march toward empire, Thrawn was setting his own pieces in motion. He saw how the military was run. He saw how the Republic's leadership operated, how the same corrupt senators and spineless bureaucrats would inevitably shape the coming empire. He saw how the war machine functioned, wasteful, reactionary, dependent on inferior minds. This empire, should it come to pass, would be powerful, but it would be weakly led. Thrawn could not allow that. He needed to secure his own power before the transition occurred, not to stop the Empire from rising, but to ensure that it was built correctly. He arranged for key officers to be placed in influential positions. He studied which commanders thrived under pressure and which cracked. He noted which clones could think beyond their programming, which strategists could be trusted, and which admirals lacked the vision for what was to come. And while he was studying the greater war, he was also studying one man. Anakin Skywalker was unlike any Jedi Thrawn had ever encountered. The Republic saw him as a hero, a warrior of unparalleled skill, a Jedi who had defied the odds time and time again. Thrawn saw something different. He studied the man's battles, not just his victories, but how he fought. Unlike his Jedi peers, Skywalker did not rely solely on philosophy or the will of the Force. He thought like a warrior. He adapted. He strategized. He understood the battlefield with a precision that no other Jedi possessed. But Anakin was also predictable. It did not take a genius to see where his loyalties truly lay. His attachment to his men was well documented. His fiery outbursts were no secret. And, most telling of all, his relationship with Padme Amidala was blatantly obvious to anyone paying attention. The Jedi may have been blind to it. The Senate may have ignored it. But Thrawn saw the pattern. His closeness to the Chancellor, his emotional recklessness, his raw anger, all of it was being manipulated. The Sith Lord was already molding Skywalker, using his ties to Padme, his frustration with the Jedi, and his desire for control to push him in a direction of his choosing. Anakin believed himself free, but in truth, he was nothing more than another piece in the Sith's grand game. Thrawn had no love for the Jedi. They were too rigid, too bound by their outdated traditions, too blind to their own failures. If they were to fall, then so be it. But Skywalker was different. Skywalker was valuable. If the Jedi were to be purged, Thrawn saw no reason to let this one go to waste. He could be turned, not by the Sith, not by fear or corruption, but by something more effective, understanding. Skywalker wanted control. Skywalker desired power, not for the sake of dominance, but because he believed it was necessary. If shaped properly, Anakin Skywalker could become something far greater than a pawn in the Sith's game, perhaps even a piece in Thrawn's own. Thrawn sat in silence, the dim glow of the holoprojector illuminating his sharp features. The message had come through moments ago. Count Dooku was dead. Skywalker had killed him. The war was over, or rather, it had served its purpose. With Dooku gone, the Separatists would soon collapse. The Senate would call for sweeping changes. The Republic would declare victory, and the Supreme Chancellor would take his final step toward absolute control. Thrawn had been waiting for this moment. His pieces were in place. Loyal military officers positioned within the fleet, key commanders embedded in the chain of command. But for his plan to succeed, he needed one final piece. He needed Anakin Skywalker. Thrawn made contact with Anakin immediately. The Jedi Knight was fresh from his duel with Dooku, unaware of the greater war still unfolding around him. When Anakin answered, his expression was tense, restless, as if he already felt something shifting beneath his feet.
General Thrawn?
Anakin's voice carried suspicion.
Why are you contacting me?
Thrawn wasted no time.
Because we are out of time,
He said.
Listen carefully, Skywalker. The war is a lie. It always has been. And the one who orchestrated it sits in the Chancellor's office.
Anakin frowned.
What are you talking about?
Palpatine is the Sith Lord we have been searching for.
Thrawn stated plainly. Anakin's face twisted in disbelief.
No, that's not possible.
You already know it is.
Thrawn pressed.
You've felt it. You've seen how he operates. Why do you think he has remained in power beyond his term? Why do you think the Jedi are beginning to question him? Why do you think he has placed his trust in you over the entire Jedi Order?
Anakin shook his head, his confusion giving way to anger.
If what you're saying is true, then the Jedi will stop him.
Thrawn's gaze hardened.
And that is precisely why you must not trust them either.
Anakin froze.
When the Jedi learn the truth,
Thrawn continued.
They will not surrender power back to the Senate. They will seize it. They will justify it as a means of stability. But make no mistake, they will consolidate control for themselves. The Sith may be their enemy, but the power vacuum left behind will tempt them. If they see you as a threat, they will remove you.
Anakin clenched his fists.
You don't know that.
I know enough.
Thrawn said.
And now, so do you. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge?
Anakin's breath was uneven.
Go to him.
Thrawn urged.
Ask him yourself. But do not go to the Jedi seeking sanctuary. When the time comes, they will act in their own interest, not yours. You must be ready.
Anakin's expression darkened, doubt clouding his features. He hesitated, then cut the transmission. Thrawn leaned back, exhaling slowly.
Now, the real war begins.
Anakin stormed into the Supreme Chancellor's office, his mind a whirlwind of doubt and fear.
Is it true?
He demanded.
Are you the Sith Lord?
Palpatine did not deny it. He did not even hesitate. He simply turned in his chair, his golden eyes gleaming with something terrifyingly familiar.
Anakin, my boy, you already know the answer.
Anakin felt the room tilt beneath him.
You orchestrated all of this. The war, the clones, the Republic's downfall.
Palpatine rose from his seat.
I saved the Republic. The Jedi would have left it to rot, bound by their hypocrisy. They have kept you from your true potential, Anakin.
He stepped closer, voice low, hypnotic.
And they will betray you when the moment comes.
Anakin staggered back.
No, they'll stop you.
They will seize power.
Palpatine countered.
They will claim it is necessary, and you will become an obstacle in their eyes. The Jedi do not tolerate those they cannot control. The dark side is not your enemy, Anakin. It is your freedom.
Anakin's mind raced. Everything Thrawn had warned him about. It was all true. And when he reported what he had learned to the Jedi Council, his worst fears were confirmed. They did not trust him. They did not see him as an ally. The Jedi were planning to take control of the government. They called it easing the transition. But Anakin knew better. And so, when Mace Windu confronted Palpatine, when their duel ended with the Sith Lord on the ground, defeated, helpless, Anakin was there. Palpatine's eyes were filled with pleading. Mace's were filled with certainty. Anakin had seconds to decide. If the Jedi took control, there would be no end to the war. Only another, greater conflict, one where no one was left to stop them. Palpatine could not be trusted. The Jedi could not be trusted. And so Anakin did what neither of them expected. As Mace swung his saber down, Anakin struck. His blade sliced through Windu's back, the Jedi Master's body jolting with shock before collapsing lifelessly to the floor. Anakin stood over the bodies of both men. Palpatine, the Sith Lord, Mace Windu, the Jedi Master, gone. Anakin's breathing was heavy, his mind blank. For the first time in his life, he stood alone. But the war was not over yet. There was still one person who had seen the game for what it truly was, Thrawn. And now, it was time to see who would shape the future of the galaxy. The transmission came through swiftly. Mas Amedda's voice was urgent, his tone laced with fear. The Supreme Chancellor was dead, assassinated by the Jedi. Thrawn allowed the information to settle in his mind, though he was already several steps ahead. He had anticipated a shift in power, but this was the perfect moment to strike. The Jedi, once seen as the guardians of the Republic, had now branded themselves as its greatest threat. The Senate would panic. The people would demand action, and Thrawn would provide them with an answer. Mas Amedda was desperate. The loss of Palpatine had left him stranded, a man without direction, without purpose. But Thrawn did not see weakness in him. He saw utility. He instructed Mas Amedda on what needed to happen next. The Senate had to be controlled. Fear was a powerful weapon, but fear alone was not enough. It had to be shaped, directed. The senators needed certainty, and Mas Amedda would give it to them. He would address the Senate at once, declaring that the Jedi had betrayed the Republic and assassinated the Supreme Chancellor in a reckless attempt to seize power. There would be no time for debate, no room for hesitation. This was an act of war, and war required decisive action. The Republic must be reorganized for security, for stability, for survival. Mas Amedda would proclaim the rise of the Galactic Empire, a necessary transformation to protect the people from the dangers that lurked within. He would speak of the Jedi as traitors, as enemies who had lost their way, and that the military, under its new leadership, would ensure that such treachery was never allowed to threaten the Republic again. And while Mas Amedda would wear the title of Emperor, it would be in name only. Thrawn had already secured the loyalty of the military, the officers in command, the fleets that controlled the hyperlanes, the ground forces stationed across the galaxy. They answered to him. Mas Amedda would be the face, the illusion of power, but Thrawn would be the one shaping the future. The Jedi were no longer an obstacle. The Senate would fall in line. The galaxy was primed for order, for true control. The war was over, the Empire had begun, and Thrawn was its true architect. The transition was swift. The Senate had approved the reformation of the Republic into the Galactic Empire without resistance. Fear of the Jedi's betrayal had made them compliant, but what followed surprised even the most skeptical voices. The galaxy did not descend into tyranny. The Empire, under Thrawn's command, was nothing like what Palpatine had envisioned. There were no mass purges, no totalitarian oppression, no rule through fear. Instead, there was order. The chaos of war faded into stability. Worlds that had once been ravaged by endless battles saw reconstruction efforts led by Imperial forces. The clone legions, no longer bound by Jedi-led campaigns, were used to protect, not subjugate. Instead of ruling through terror, Thrawn ruled through efficiency, using his brilliant mind to create an empire that truly served the people. There were still those who resisted, of course. Pockets of Jedi who had escaped purges, separatist holdouts who refused to surrender, but they were not hunted. They were neutralized through strategy, through diplomacy, through controlled engagements that ensured the least amount of casualties. The galaxy saw peace for the first time in years, and the people respected the man responsible for it. Even Padme Amidala, who had once been a fierce opponent of authoritarian rule, could not deny what she saw with her own eyes. Anakin had remained by Thrawn's side through the transition, watching as his leadership transformed the Empire into something entirely different from what had been feared. Anakin had spent years questioning his place in the Jedi Order, questioning their methods, questioning why peace had always seemed just out of reach. But now, under Thrawn's vision, peace was real. It existed, it flourished, and he brought Padme into it. At first, she had resisted, skeptical, wary of any government that consolidated power so absolutely. But the more she saw, the more she understood. This was not the dictatorship she had feared. This was not Palpatine's iron-fisted rule. This was something else. Anakin convinced her that this was the way forward, that this was what the galaxy had needed all along. And for the first time, Padme allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had been fighting the wrong battle all along. Perhaps the Jedi's downfall had not been the loss of peace. Perhaps it had been the beginning of it. But Thrawn had not done all of this merely for power. He had not orchestrated the war's end simply for control. He had not built an empire simply for dominance. Because Thrawn knew something that no one else did. The Republic, the Jedi, the Sith, the war, it had all been irrelevant compared to what lay beyond the known galaxy. The Yuuzhan Vong were coming. For years, Thrawn had been aware of the threat lurking outside the galactic borders, an enemy unlike anything the Republic had ever faced, an enemy beyond the Force itself. They would come, and when they did, the Republic as it once was would have never survived. This was why Thrawn had done everything he had. This was why he had manipulated events, why he had positioned himself at the head of the galaxy. because only he could ensure that the galaxy was ready for what was to come. The people had no idea. The Senate had no idea. Not even Anakin or Padme had any idea, but they would, because peace never lasted forever, and the true war was only just beginning.